Hello everybody. I haven't been making videos in a while, but I'm changing the brakes, the rotors, and the wheel bearings on my truck, and I figured that I'll make a video on how to do that. Now, this video really applies to any full-size van, regardless of brand, and any pickup truck, regardless of brand, as long as it's two-wheel drive. So this process is going to be very, very similar, and as I go through it, the tiny little differences between the brands, I will point them out so that you can watch this video as a reference to put brakes, rotors, wheel bearings on absolutely any full-size van, absolutely any pickup truck, as long as it's two-wheel drive. So the first thing that you do, you don't jack it up first. The first thing that you do is you get these lug nuts cracked off so that they are not loose, but not really tight. And the reason you do that is because if you jack it up first, just like that, just a little bit off. If you jack it up first, you'll be trying to do this and the wheel will just be spinning. So you got to do this first. You just crack all these so that they're not super tight. And then right after that, you jack up the truck. Okay, so the truck is jacked up off the ground. I can spin the wheel. All these are loose. Now think about jacking up a car or a truck or anything really. Use jack stands. Use something that's gonna control what's going on in the truck. Because when I was 18, I first started working on cars. A car did fall on my foot and it destroyed my foot. You should see the scar that I got from it. So make really sure that everything is secure, that if you're doing front brakes, that you have your parking brake on, so that nothing strange happens while you're concentrating on this. So I'm going to go ahead and take this wheel off. Okay, so the wheel's off. This is what it looks like. This is the rotor. Alright, this is what's called a hub. This is a caliper. Alright, and the pads are inside the caliper. Now, how a caliper works is there's a piston inside here. When you push the brake pedals, it pushes this together, and the brake pads will grab the rotor and give you stopping power. Now, how you check your rotors for if they're bad, the very first thing is if you push your brake pedal on the highway and your steering wheel starts shaking, your rotors are bad. And you may not be able to see it, but there's grooves in here. And it's spinning so fast, when the brake pads grab it, it'll create some extra friction, and you'll be able to feel it in your steering wheel. So I have that a little bit, not too much, but when I take this off, I put my finger on it. Now, don't do this if you were just driving it, because these things are very hot and you'll scorch your finger. But if you put your finger and then push it up like this, if you got a little lip here or a little lip here, then your rotors are pretty much ready to be replaced. And if you don't want to replace them, there's plenty of shops who will cut them for you for like $10 or $15. They put it on a machine and they'll cut it down, and it makes the rotor a little bit smaller, but it will get rid of all of these creases. I don't really do that because rotors are cheap enough for me. I can just buy new ones. So I did that, and this one has a pretty serious lip. The other one didn't have a pretty serious lip. It was okay, but this one's pretty bad. I can feel it, and you can hear it when I rub my thumb on it. So I'm gonna have to take this caliper off. That's the very first thing we got to do. Now, to do that, on this one, this is a Dodge, and a lot of these Dodges are like this. It's very, very strange, if you ask me, is that there's a bolt here. Let's see if I can zoom in. There's a bolt here, and it holds this plate on. And then there's a bolt here, and it holds this plate on. And you pop these bolts out, and you pop these plates off, and this caliper will come off. Now, the difference between GMCs, the Fords, and the Chevy vans is that these bolts are not on the sides like this. They're in the back, and they go through this way. So the bolts will be right back here. There's two of them, and you just pop them out, and they're very long bolts. So you just take them out, and once you take them out, the caliper will come off. So I'm going to go ahead and undo this. And also, so a lot of the older Fords, there's a triangle-looking pin here. and it runs the length of the caliper. And so what you do is you put a screwdriver on it and you just tap it out, and that pin will tap out, it'll go out the back, and there's two of them, just like as if they were bolts. So the systems are, the way that they put these calipers on are different among the manufacturers, but the idea is the same, and it's always two fasteners that do it. And so I'm going to take these bolts off. Oh well, let me show you something. Sometimes these bolts, they won't come off. Sometimes you'll put your ratchet or what have you on it, and you'll be pulling and pulling and pulling, and you can't get it off. This one's going to come off pretty easy because I did these brakes 10 months ago, but I didn't do the rotors. But sometimes it'll be a real hassle, and you just can't get them off. So what you do is, what do I got here? So what you do is you'll put your ratchet on, and the bolt won't be coming off. So what you do is you take a hammer and you tap your ratchet, and you might be able to hit it hard, and then it'll crack the bolt off. And then once you crack the bolt off, you can just spin it the rest of the way. So I'm going to take these off. I'm going to show you the very next step. Okay, so now in theory, once you got the bolts off, I got the bolts off and the plates off, this caliper should come off, but it doesn't come off, right? Because of that piston I was talking about in the back is pushing the brake pads together when you push the brakes. But even in a resting position, it still has plenty of power pushing the brake pads onto the rotor. So this won't just come off by itself. A lot of people will, there's plenty of places to pry this. So people will pry it up here, and it comes off a little bit, or they'll pry it on the bottom. But what I like to do is, I like to stick it in this hole. There's always this hole here. On a lot of Fords, there's a plate in this hole, and you can't get to it. But I like to stick a screwdriver in here so that it's touching this front pad within here, and I'll pull on it. And as I pull on it, it depresses that piston, and it takes the pressure off of the rotor. And you see how it's moving? The whole caliper is moving because I'm depressing that pin. And you want to use a mangy screwdriver for this, because these things are pretty strong, and it'll bend pretty much any screwdriver. So I got this mangy screwdriver to do this kind of work for me. And once you've got it depressed, the caliper's super loose now, so I could just pop it right off. And remember where these brake pads were, because sometimes it gets confusing. If you haven't done this a whole bunch of times, you won't really know where they go. So remember where they go and how they came off of here, so that when you put the new ones on, you can know where they came from, and you won't have a big problem. So on this one, the outside brake pad goes on the caliper, and then the inside brake pad sits on this here bracket. So you just pull it out. Now these brake pads aren't bad. These are the best brake pads that I could find, and they've been on there for 11 months, and they still got a lot of juice. But I don't care. I'm just going to replace them anyway, because I just really wanted to get the rotors done. Now, another difference between some manufacturers and the fact about pickup trucks, and even the fact about cars. Okay, first things first. When you're doing this, there's this hose here. It's made of rubber on the outside, but on the inside it's stainless steel. It's a really thin stainless steel. So when you take this caliper off, don't let it hang by that thing, because you'll crimp the thing, and then one day you'll push your brake pedal and it'll blow up on you, and you'll have no brakes, and it'll be no good. So these things need to stay in good shape. And while you're here, just look and see if you can see any fluid on it. If you do, it needs to be replaced. So you need to put this somewhere where it's not killing this tube here. So I just put it on the top of this here control arm, and usually that works for these vans. Sometimes it doesn't. You got to lay it down and put like a box or something so that it'll lay on the box. But that's that. The caliper is off. Now, difference between manufacturers. Some of these brackets for the calipers will go like this over the rotor. So in order to get the rotor off, you're going to need to take this bracket off. And there's two big bolts in the bracket. You'll see them. Very, very easy. If that's the case, if your bracket goes over your rotor, you're going to need to take this bracket off to get the rotor off. And that's two big bolts, and then usually very, very hard to get off. You're going to need to hit that that ratchet with a hammer to get them loosened up. And when you put them back, you're going to need to put them back very, very, very rough. So that's that. This one and my Ford had brackets like this where you didn't need to do that, but almost every car has brackets like this because this rotor is on here by a bolt that's inside of here, and we're going to now get to that part. We're going to take the rotor off. So first thing you do is, there's always these little caps on here, lips. So I got my mangy screwdriver, and you're going to want to just pry this thing off. It's not on there tough, it just kind of sits in there. And underneath here, you'll likely see just a whole bunch of grease. And I've got a towel over here that I've been using for the grease because I did the other side first. So you're just going to want to take this. Let me zoom in some more. You're going to want to pluck all this grease off of here so that you can see what's going on. Alright, so now the grease is off and we've got a visual on what's actually going on inside here. Now, what's going on inside here is that there's a nut that holds this rotor on. But before the nut, there's this cotter pin. So what you do with a cotter pin is you push it down, and then you want to push it up so that, here's my little needle nose plier or something. And you're going to want to push it up and pull it up and pry this thing on out of here. The other one came out really easy, and I was making a video of it, and I was like, wow, this is coming out really easy. Usually they're hard to get out, but this one's giving me a mild battle. But yeah, it's coming out. There you go. I wanted you to see that whole thing. I didn't want to, you know, turn the camera off because sometimes they're hard to get out, sometimes they're easy to get out. But this one came out, and what this thing does is, there's this cap here, and it holds the bolt. And these bolts aren't on very tight, and this wheel is always spinning. So what they do is they put this cap on here, and they put this cotter pin inside so that this cap can't spin, so that the bolt can't spin. So essentially, this little cotter pin and this little tiny thing will keep your wheel from flying off your truck while you're driving. So I'm just going to chuck these over here. When you take this kind of stuff apart, if you don't do this all the time, just make sure that you know where everything went as you're taking it off. Remember, or take pictures with your phone or something so that you can have a reference. Okay, they're not too tight. You're not really supposed to use these kind of things for these bolts. You're supposed to use a socket, but you know, my sockets are all over the place right now, so I'm just going to use this. And lefty loosey, righty tighty, man. So lefty loosey. See how easy that was to get off? Very easy. So here goes the nut. It's coming off. Now at this point, this rotor can come right off of the spindle, but I'm going to go a step further so I don't lose any pieces. There's a washer behind here, and right behind the washer is the outer wheel bearing, and these always have two wheel bearings. This is very easy. Don't get intimidated. This is so simple to do. All you have to do is watch a YouTube video and you know how to do it. So there we go. This is a little washer, and it's got a little lip, so it can only go on one way, so you'll never get it lost. And like I said, I kind of like line these up on the ground as they came off. Now there's an outer bearing here. Now you don't want to, I mean, you could pry the outer bearing out, but what I do is I just grab the rotor. Let me zoom out a little bit. I just grab the rotor and pull it a little bit, and then that'll give you the bearing. So now I've got the outer bearing here. Now these bearings are shaped like this, and the thinner side, the smaller side, always goes in. No matter how you're doing it, no matter where you're at, no matter what kind of machine you're working on, these bearings that are like this, the thinner side always goes in. So maybe you can remember that. Now the rotor is on its way out. When I take this out, nothing happens. Very easy breezy. Now on the inside of here, there is a seal that seals the grease from like spilling out on the inside, and then there's the inner bearing in here. Now if you don't want to buy new seals every time you do this, just have a look. These seals look like they're in pretty good shape, and I'm going to show you how to get these seals out without damaging them, because a lot of people would take a screwdriver and kind of like go in here and try to pry them, and then it'll be all dinged up by the time you're done. But I'm going to show you how to do it without messing it up at all. Okay, so here's that thing, the rotor. Here's the seal, and there's a bearing. It like floats around in there. You'll see it. So what you do is, instead of ruining your seal, you can reuse your seal. Now what you do is you turn this over, and you'll see the bearing in there. What you do is you take that same mangy screwdriver and you put it on the bearing, and you tap it a couple times. Don't hit it, tap it. And then you go on the other side, tap it. The little side, tap it. Just tap the bearing. Other side, tap it. And you just keep tapping it. And the seal will come out. So now it just popped out. So now here we go. This is empty. This here is the seal and the inner bearing. So here's the bearing, here's the seal, and I didn't dent it at all. I just kind of pushed it out, and it's in great nick. So the next very thing that we have to do is I have to show you how to pack bearings, and we're going to get to that right now. Okay, so now we're at the wonderful world of packing bearings. So the first thing you're going to need to do if you're doing the bearings, or even if you do the rotors, you're going to need to take these bearings out, and you're going to need to repack them when you put them back in so they don't get damaged. You're going to need to get some bearing grease. It doesn't matter what brand, it doesn't matter anything. Wheel bearing grease, that's all you need. They're all different colors. Some of them are blue, some of them are brown, some of them are turquoise, some of them are all different kinds of colors. These things come in, depends on the brand, what color it is. I don't really care. It's all the same stuff. This one looks like something you get at Thanksgiving dinner. So what you do is, here's my old bearing. It's got grease all over it. So I'm just gonna like kind of take the grease off. A lot of people are OCD about this, so they want to wash it in their sink, and that's cool. You know, you could wash it off and make sure you got everything out. That's fine with me. I'm not gonna be mad at you for it. But I just wipe them off, because the only thing that really gets in here, as long as your seals are okay, is the grease. So here's the bearing. Now you can look at a bearing and you see there's all these little spaces in between all of this stuff. There's a space here. So what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to fill all these spaces with grease. The grease has to be all inside of all of this stuff. Now when you take a bearing out, you can check to see if it's good, and the way that you check to see if it's good is you check it here, you push the inner ring in and out. It should move a tiny little bit. See how it's moving? It's moving a tiny little bit as I do that. And you're going to want to look and see if all of these are in good shape, if there's any nicks or any damage or any breakage, like these on the inside, they'll break sometimes or crack or something, but these bearings look like they're in very good condition. And wheel bearings last 100,000 miles at least, you know, so as long as you keep these things packed, they'll last you a very, very long time. Now, how you pack a bearing is you grab some grease. With grease, the more the merrier. Here's the grease. Here's the bearing. You push it. You push the grease. You push the bearing on the pile of grease. You spin it, you push it. You spin it, you push it. You spin it, you push it. Because what you're doing is you're filling up all those little gaps with grease. And you just push it on in there, you 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 push it on in there. And then once you're done the sides, you're going to want to do these sides. So you just get grease. Like I said, with this grease, the more the merrier. You can't use too much of it, I'll tell you that right now. And you just push it, push it, push it. Because then you're filling up all those little gaps that you saw before. They're all filled with grease. Every single one of them, they're filled with grease. And you're just going to want to make sure that there's no empty air pockets. If there is, push some more, push some more, push some more until you get all those little air pockets out. Because the worst thing that you can do to a wheel bearing is let it be ungreased. These trucks are very, very heavy, and these trucks go really fast. This wheel bearing is always working, and it'll continue to work properly if there's grease. If there's air pockets in there, you're creating unnecessary friction, and you're going to have a problem with your wheel bearings. So now, once you've got your wheel bearings, oh man, my hands are all full of grease. Once you've got your wheel bearings, let's see if I can do this without destroying my camera. All right. Once you got your bearing greased, I put more and more and more. I just put more and more and more. I don't care. You know, it's the more the merrier, man. It's just like Thanksgiving dinner. Here we go. Like I said before, the thinner of the two sides goes inside. Once you got this bearing greased, you just drop it on in there. Make sure it's straight, and it's straight. So let me zoom in a little bit. Oh no. I guess that's all the zooming I'm getting. And then once you get it in there, put more grease. Fill up all the little crevices, all the little places where there's air pockets. Just fill it up with this grease. You can't use too much of it, I'll tell you. It's a good thing. So you just fill all these with grease, fill them up, fill them up, fill them up. So now I don't have any crevices at all in there, and I feel good about it. So, and access is good in this system. So then, what you do is you got to put your seal back on. This seal is in great shape. Doesn't have any nicks. It doesn't have any damage. So I'm cool with that. I'll just put it right back in there. And you can just leave it like that, and you get your little screwdriver again, and your little hammer again, and you take it on the corners, right on the edges of it, give it a little tap. Tiny little tap, no big deal. And you just do all the different sides. Until it's in there straight, and that's in there straight. Now the grease belongs on the inside of that seal, not on the outside, so any grease that you've got that popped out or anything, you just kind of like get it on out of there. This is a very messy job. Very, very messy. Alright, so now that that's done, I can take this this rotor and flip it over. And once I got it flipped over, I can do the inner bearing over here. So here's my inner bearing. Same thing, check it out. See if it's got any cracks or dents, or if there's an excess of movement from the inside ring to the outside ring. And this one is the same. It feels like a brand new bearing, and it looks like a brand new bearing. So I'm cool with using this over again. Same thing. You have to pack these bearings. Now, I could slip this in here right now, but I like to put the rotor on the spindle first and then put the bearing in, just like how it came out. Okay, so here's the spindle. Same thing with the spindle, man. The more the merrier. There's a lot of grease on this already, and I just took my my gloves off, so I'm not going to put any grease, but you can like litter this thing with grease, and it's better for you. So, here's my rotor. Oh, these things are not light. Okay, so here we go. Just throw it on in there. And when you throw this on in there, it's going to move back and forth and all that because the other bearing is not in there. So now I've got my outer bearing. I'm going to slip it on in there. Nice and breezy. And after that, I'm going to get some more grease. Oops, there we go. I'm going to get some more grease and shove it on in there. So there's no space. There's no space with air in it. All the space is occupied by grease. And as you're doing this, it'll be easier to like spin the rotor, because there might be an air pocket in there that you don't know about. So if you spin it, you can spin it a little bit. You'll see the grease move. but you'll see if you have any empty pockets of air in there, which I don't have. It's all grease. It's just spinning around, and that's good with me. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to continue. The very next step was the washer. There goes my washer, right on there. Very nice. Very next step, the bolt. I mean the nut. There we go, nut. Get on there. There are specs for your particular brand of how tight to put these, and it'll be in like inch pounds or foot pounds of torque. And if you want to be really technical and get it absolutely perfect, you're going to need to go ahead and look up the specs for that and get a torque wrench, which will click once you get to that torque. Now I've done this so many times that I'm used to how tight these things go. Now once it starts getting tight, you spin it. You spin it toward the direction that you're going. All right. And what this does is it presses the bearings in and gets them all exactly where they're supposed to be. All right. So you just spin this. I can spin it backwards too, and then you unloosen it again. Right. And you spin it. You spin it, and you tighten it. Right. And if you're on here with a wrench or something, it's only like hand tight. You're not giving this thing a lot of juice. You're just kind of like, just like that. And even when you're close, you'll be able to tell, because if you put this this cap on, it'll line up with where that cotter pin is supposed to be. See, I'm a little tiny bit off because the cotter pin is not going to go in because there's a little lip here. So I'm going to turn it just a little bit more. Oh, I'm going to turn it loose, and that should be good. Oh, it's fall in the northeast. There's leaves everywhere. All right, there we go. That looks good. That's a good idea, man. You know, when you use a cotter pin, you take a cotter pin out, put a brand new cotter pin in there. I know that I'm not practicing what I preach right now, but it's a good idea, you know, because these cotter pins, their job is so important, you know, that you don't want it to snap off, which it usually doesn't, but you know, it's just good to be safe about it. So the cotter pin is on there. You just twist it up. Now this is done, right? And you can put your cap back on, which is very easy to do. You just put it back on, and kind of like hit it with a hammer or something. It's in there, and wipe off excess grease. Okay, and that's the rotor. And now we're going to put the pads on and the caliper on. Okay, so here we go. I've got the brand new brake pads. Now these, I'm going to show you the box, just to show you what I bought. I bought Wagner Severe Duty Super Crazy brake pads. And I've never used these before. I have used Wagner before, and they're, you know, they're good. They're expensive, but they're good. And so what you're going to do is you're just going to put these to make sure that that they go on right, that you bought the right brake pads and everything. And so what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to look and see all the places where this brake pad touches this, or touches anything. Not the brake pad itself touching the rotor, but everything else that's touching. So all of this here, and then all of this here is going to be touching a surface and moving. So what you need to do is you need to get some brake grease. They usually come in these little packets. You can buy tubs of it too, you know. So you put the little grease on all the places where there's going to be friction, where there's going to be a piece touching another piece. So here we go. So I'm just going to chuck this right here where it belongs. Make sure that it moves smoothly. It's fine with me. And then on this brand, this brake pad goes on the bracket and the other brake pad right here goes on the caliper itself. So here's the caliper. Now what you're going to want to do with this caliper is you're going to have to flex that piston, because that piston that I was talking about, I wonder if I can get this camera in a situation where you can see the piston. Okay, you can see the piston. This is the piston. Sometimes they're smaller, sometimes they're bigger. Now when I flexed it with that screwdriver when we first started taking this off, I pushed this piston in. And you're going to need to push this piston all the way in order to get these brand new brake pads on here. So there's a couple ways to do it. The one way is with the screwdriver, but with the screwdriver sometimes you won't get it all the way in, and you'll need it to get in just like another 1/8 of an inch in. So what you do is you take one of your old brake pads, you just stick it on there, and I have a special tool for this. And what this does is you screw it and it pushes this pin out, and then it'll push this piston in. So I'm going to show you how this works. And you can also use a C-clamp for this same purpose. But these things are like $8, and if you're going to be doing your own brakes, it's cool to have one of these because it makes it so much easier. So you just twist it, and it'll push that little piston in. And then once it stops twisting, the piston is all the way in. Now, if you are doing this and it stops, you can't turn it anymore, and the piston is not in all the way, that means that your caliper is seized, and you're going to need to buy a new caliper. Just as a little fun fact, it doesn't happen all the time, but it happens sometimes. And people get frustrated and they don't know what's going on. So now, I'm going to put this pad on here, just for the sake of looking to see where this pad touches this caliper. So the pad is touching the caliper here, it's touching it down here, it's touching it on this little lip, it's touching it on this little lip, and it's touching it here on the back surface. So I'm going to put grease on all those places before I put this pad on here for good. I'm pretty well greased up. I'm cool with that. So now what we're going to do, we're going to stick this thing on here. Make sure it's greased in all the places it needs to be. Seems that way. And then we're going to put this back. Easy breezy. I think Dodge, these are the easiest. The way that they go back is the easiest because of the way that the bolts hold them down. And then you're going to need to take your little brackets, or if you got a Ford, the pins, or perhaps the bolts in the back, or if you got a GMC, it's almost always the bolts in the back. And you just make sure that this is on right. Now you don't want to tighten one bolt before you tighten the other bolt. You just put them in with your fingers. Both of them. And this is like sort of like an anomaly. When you have something like this and you put the one bolt in and you tighten it without putting the other bolt in, sometimes it gets impossible to put the other bolt in, because when you're tightening this one, it'll move this around a little bit, you know, like millimeters, and then it will disalign this bolt, so you won't be able to put it in. And also that same fact is true when you're tightening them. You're going to want to tighten a little bit, the top one, just a little bit, and then you're going to want to go to the bottom one and tighten that one a little bit. And then once that's tightened, just like this one, then you want to tighten this one a little bit more, then this one a little bit more. And that makes everything so that it's consistent and it's even. Both of the bolts are going to tighten at the same rate, and you won't burn up any threads, and you won't break any bolts. Now these are supposed to go on pretty tight, but not too tight, because these are always about 1,000 degrees. They're always being hot when you're driving them, so they get weak and brittle sort of, and it's very easy to snap these bolts, and that's true for any caliper. It's easy to snap the bolts. In fact, last time I did this, I did snap one of these bolts and I had to drill it out, and that it became a little bit more work than I was happy to do. So this is it. make sure that everything is on there. Make sure that you're not leaking any brake fluid anywhere, that these lines are not cracked or otherwise destroyed. You can spin your rotor a little bit. Oh, fun fact about rotors. Rotors, when they make these things and they box them, they spray them with a chemical to keep them from rusting inside the box while they're sitting around waiting for somebody to buy them. So if I were to just put this wheel on here and just start driving, the wheels would be smoking probably for like 20-30 minutes or one day after I do these brakes. These will be smoking because what is happening is burning off all of that chemical that they sprayed on there. So it's a good idea when you buy brand new rotors is to just clean them off a little bit. I don't bother with it because if my wheels are smoking, I don't care. I know that it's not a dangerous thing. It's just going to take 20-30 minutes of braking to burn off all of that chemical that they put on. So we're done. This looks good to me. Everything is fine. You put your wheel back on and you let your truck down. Now before you turn on your truck, when you do this kind of thing, remember we depressed this caliper. It's in a totally resting state now. So if you were to turn on your truck and just start driving and you hit the brakes, the brake pedal is going to go all the way to the floor. So what you're going to do is get in your truck, don't turn it on, get in the truck once everything is done, the wheel is on, and pump your brake pedal a few times and you'll feel it get hard. And then you turn on your truck and you do that again. You pump your brake pedal until it gets hard, until it feels the way that it should feel, and then you can take off. You're ready to fly. Thanks a lot for watching. I hope I saved somebody some money. I hope I gave somebody some knowledge that they can use. If you have any questions about brakes, just throw it in the comments below. I know pretty much everything there is to know about brakes, and I'll be glad to help. Now, if you're doing it and if you're stuck on something, you can't really comment me because I'm not going to get the comment straight away to be able to help you out. But there's plenty of YouTube videos about different things. So like if you have a problem, like a bolt broke or something as crazy is going on, you can type that into YouTube, and there's a lot of videos. There's a lot of really good mechanics out there who have good tricks, and we'll be able to make a video that'll help you out. So anyway, I'm done with this. I just got to put this wheel back on and let go of the jack and drive it around and make sure there's no noises, and I'm good. So once again, thank you for watching. I really appreciate it, and I hope I helped.